Seconds. Go.
Great. So welcome everyone to today's live webinar. We have 4 sports betting personas at every casino. Today's webinar is hosted by Chalkline CEO Daniel Kustelski, and we will have a couple guests. As always, this is part of the Operator's Edge webinar series. So the Operator's Edge webinar series is our monthly, every third Thursday, we put together a monthly live webinar where we share experiences and data points from the industry. So we are going to get started here. Just give me one moment. And actually, we are going to be, I believe we're going to be having a special guest today. However, while we're coordinating a couple items on that person's attendance, we're just going to go ahead and dive in. So what I would like to do is just start with the legislative update. Actually, we'll just go ahead and introduce our guest. So Chris Grove will be joining us today. So he's the Managing Director of Sports and Emerging Verticals at Eilers & Krejcik. Chris has been in the industry a really long time. He's been he's the founder of the Online Poker Report, founder of the Legal Sports Report, and just regularly cited by mainstream media and a whole range of industry publications and industry leaders. So we're excited to have him join here in just one moment. But with that, I'm going to kick it over to our CEO, Daniel Kustelski, who is going to start with the legislative update.
Yeah, great, Joe. Thanks a lot. Okay, so the past couple of weeks, we've seen quite a few states go live. Arkansas has taken a wager. New York has taken a wager. A couple of bills have been signed. North Carolina is moving along quickly, and it's all pretty positive. I think that from my perspective, I look at the legislative update, and I can't help but be encouraged by it. I'm always a glass half full rather than a half empty kind of guy. There's some obvious discussions about the lack of mobile and the fact that there's money being left on the table. That goes without saying. I think recently I was looking into some numbers where Mississippi's casino revenues are about 70% of New Jersey's, yet their sports betting numbers are about 10% of New Jersey's. So, is Mississippi leaving money on the table? Without a doubt. If you talk to the teams down in Mississippi, they would readily admit that. But it feels like, they're starting to see the light. Feels like they're starting to move towards, those discussions. The casinos certainly would like that, but yeah, I think that there's a timeline that everybody's got to go through, and I think the states legalizing when they are, here in the first half of the year has been pretty positive all around. States like Tennessee, still they still haven't even had a meeting yet, even though they legalized mobile sports betting. Still haven't even had a meeting yet for their through their lottery organization to regulate sports betting. So that happens on the 14th of August. States like Tennessee that don't have any gambling boards are going to take a while, whereas we saw the speed with which Indiana was able to set dates out, and it's just simply because they've got casinos to use as examples. So without further ado, that's our legislative update. As always, we talk about the current and the future sports bettors. This is a slide from the American Gaming Association, came out in late March. We're going to be talking about the current and the future bettors. And various personas. I won't mention too much about, millennials and demographics, simply because we're going to be talking about personas, but we're going to be talking about all of these people and the phases that everybody goes through in the current and future sports bettors. 91.5 million Americans estimated to be potential sports bettors. So before we talk about personas, I just want to talk about what is a persona and why does it matter? It's not just an audience segment. It's more about behavioral patterns. Some customer demographics, without a doubt, but it's really about what bettors do. Particularly in this case, in a sports book, and what they're also doing in the casino. And what motivates them? What drives them? What motivates them to deposit, to sign up, to place wagers? And none of these personas, it's a pretty fluid process. People don't just stay a casual gambler. Sometimes they progress, or they stop. Sometimes people move from being sharp in one particular sport or in one particular area, and they're incredibly casual in other forms. So this isn't necessarily rigid. It's certainly a fluid process. And then why does it matter? Well, you can't really, you can't really understand your book without getting good data. So obviously getting good data on all of the activities of potential players. And in this particular case, my experience was that we were able to see kind of a single view of a customer from the casino into the sports book, and vice versa. So it starts with really good data, but once you understand what motivates them and how they operate, then you can start to put people into various segments, and you can start to market to them. As we say, personas and marketing excellence, and that evolves with each individual operator. I venture to say that the books that we're seeing in the United States, they're all probably a little different. They're all going to have slightly different personas. But what we're going to talk about today is just four big buckets that that we know exist on the casino floor. Now, before I get going, I will say this: 60% of all the casino patrons in Africa bet on sports. So I know that they exist. I think most recently at the Southern Gaming Summit in March at the GM panel, the GMs varied on how much crossover they're actually getting from land-based from the casinos to the sports books. One GM in particular mentioned a number like 70%. Another GM mentioned 30%. So this is all going to vary to some extent, and I don't mean to sound too much like a lawyer by saying it depends. But this will give you at least some decent guidelines on how to look at it. Okay, casual bettors. So the casual bettors are really everywhere in the casino floor. They probably skew more towards the table games, but these are people that they're not the most frequent bettors, not the highest, not the biggest bettors in the in the casino. And they really do, they really are not necessarily the most valuable. On our book, we had about 50 to 60% of our sports book was casual bettors. And they really only accounted for about 20% of our revenues. So there's a lot of them, not necessarily the most profitable. What are they? What are they betting on? It's usually parlays and big events. Certainly they follow their team or their particular sport. And as you look at what motivates the casual gamblers. They're probably just curious about sports betting, and they just want a little bit of action to get down to, to make that particular sports event a little more fun. When we look in New Jersey right now, the numbers are pretty interesting. About 40% of the net revenues on sports betting in New Jersey is on parlays. And that's a pretty large number, and I can't help but think that is an indication about how casual the New Jersey sports betting market is. Now, if you read some of the news and you follow Twitter, then you think, oh, there are all these sharp bettors that are getting all these accounts closed, and I'll talk about that as a persona just now. But There's a lot of casual gamblers, and certainly when you compare it from Nevada to New Jersey, we're seeing a far larger group of casual gamblers. They're probably going to have one or two books, max. That they just want to put a little bet on and not have to go through too much of a headache in order to place that wager. So things like UI and UX are pretty important. If they have any problem depositing money into their online sports betting account, they're probably just going to fall away. So as you're looking at that funnel, the casual gamblers, there's going to be a lot of holes in that particular funnel, as I discussed, as they're 50 to 60% of a particular sports book inside of a casino. How do you look at converting those casuals? First of all, just introducing them to sports, and we've got some free to play games that we provide. But I mean, the a couple of data points, like for instance, that 75% of the wagers in, say, Mississippi are coming from kiosks. That sounds like a pretty casual, a casual gambling trait. They're trying to figure out how to bet. They don't want it. They're a little embarrassed about going up and talk to somebody about how to place that bet, and they'd rather just sit at the kiosk and do it themselves. But it's about introducing that sports book to people over time and letting them do that in their own time. Other ways of converting casual gamblers are simply offering things that maybe you're just pop culture. There was an example of the royal wedding. If we look at the sports fans are slightly more sophisticated. They're going to be about 30 to 40% of all the people on a sports book inside of a casino. Sports bars and Super Bowl events and all the viewing parties and those types of things. These are the people that just simply they've got a little bit of knowledge, and they know they've got a little bit of knowledge, and that might be about a sport or a player or simply how to bet. They understand, where casuals may not really understand the difference between -110 or 115 or even care if they do. But the sports fans are a little more in tune to that. And they're starting to bet, more frequently. So we're progressing. We on our sports book in the casino, we would push people always trying to push people from casuals, to the sports fans, helping them get familiar with not just betting on sports and sports itself, but just the process. What are they playing? Probably skews way more towards table games, and they might already have a book. Now, what motivates them? Obviously supporting their team, but like in the last bullet, they're not afraid to bet against their team because they're starting to understand, hey, wait a minute, that might not be the best price. New England's always a short price, or Green Bay Packers are always a short price in Nevada. Let me bet against that particular team because that's probably a more savvy bet. They're really betting on things like futures and singles and props. Those are the types of bets that they're wagering on, and odds are starting to matter. I mean, it matters to them whether they're getting -120 or -110. Probably have 3 or 4 books too. They're starting to get the hang of it. They've they've gone through the process with a few different sports books. And these sports bettors are comfortable, and are looking for things like, hey, listen, this particular book, maybe their live and play is a little bit better than this particular book, where that particular book is offers really good bonuses, or the customer service is a whole lot better. So they're starting to differentiate. Whereas the casual gambler, to be perfectly honest with you, is probably just give me $5 or $10 on my particular event. Let me put that in a 5-team parlay, and away I go. So how do you convert these sports fans? Like I said, they are going to be a little more price sensitive, and value sensitive. So for instance, if you can offer some loyalty points, we integrated our sports book into the loyalty program for the casino group. Certainly something that I would recommend across the United States. It makes a huge difference. but yeah, allow them to support their team, or allow them, a wide variety of events or markets to wager on. They may be familiar with in play, but certainly this is the group where they're starting to play live, to bet on half times and full times as the games are going on. Here's another example of one of our free-to-play games where we're offering correct score on the hockey hat trick with Vegas, and this was a local promotion that we did. But those sports fans, they're probably about 40% of the book, and they're about 40% of the revenues. So a little more equitable, probably twice as valuable for a sports book than the casual gamblers, but you kind of need to get people into the top of the funnel from a casual sports betting perspective to get them down into the sports fans. Next one is the high rollers. High rollers mostly found these. I mean, it was just VIPs. We really didn't find too many high rollers in our sports book without them being a high roller in the casino. Now I'm sure that's going to happen, and there's a lot of levers in order to make that happen. But they're really in it for the high stakes game. Their bet frequency is pretty varied, and their bet size is medium to large. Very, very sensitive around player rewards and status. Here's what I'll say about high rollers. They can make your book incredibly hard to manage from a risk perspective. So there's a, when a high roller comes in and they're used to playing on the blackjack tables, or they're used to playing high-end roulette, and then they go and they want to bet on sports, and they want to put $100,000 or $1 million down on a particular event. That causes some challenges. That causes certainly some challenges between the book and the casino, because the casino is sitting there saying, hey, listen, the GM of that casino is saying, hey, this is one of my high rollers, you got to let them do whatever you want, and the GM for the sports book's probably saying, hey, listen, I've got a risk management that I've got to uphold, and they simply just don't have enough wagers on the other side of wherever that high roller's betting, and oftentimes, what we would find sometimes is that we would have high rollers come in and they would hear a tip, Iran's playing USA in soccer, and they get a wild tip. Well, we just don't pull in enough money in order to be able to take that $150,000, $200,000 wager on one side or the other. And so there are all of these processes that we would work through prior to launching and bringing in these high rollers to understand how we're going to manage that from a risk perspective. And here in the United States, what I'm seeing is you've got an operator sitting in a land-based casino group with a software provider, and all of these people are earning percentages of revenues. So, from a sports book, the person operating or running the sports book is saying, look, I've been told by the casino to take as much, to take this person's wagers, because we don't want them to leave the casino and be frustrated with our casino group and move to another casino group. Whereas the software provider is saying, hey, listen, I am managing risk, and I am in complete control of how we manage risk and a margin, because I'm earning a revenue share on that. And these are just things that need to be sorted out, prior or hopefully during, or at least highlighted in some of the challenges that I've been seeing here in the United States. Motivations for high rollers, it's all about status, access to unique contests and those types of things. A lot of times what I'm seeing is there's a lot of confusion, I think, right now around who's a high roller and who's sharp, and simply because somebody wins 10 bets in a row does not mean that they are sharp, nor does losing 10 bets in a row mean that they aren't sharp. But right now I think we've got risk management teams that are so new to taking bets here in the United States, that they're challenged from this perspective. So you hear a lot about, people having accounts closed, and they go up in arms around Twitter, which is always a fun read. But but yeah, it is difficult to sometimes distinguish between a high roller that's winning and a sharp bettor. And usually these high rollers only have one or two bets. I mean, one or two accounts because they're pretty loyal. The high rollers are usually about 5 to 10% of the book, but they account for about 40% of the revenue. So from a revenues perspective, that 5 to 10% of people, is the same value as the sports fans. So how do you convert high rollers? It's about the VIP games. It's about just creating a great opportunity, building that personal relationship, and pretty much letting those high rollers bet on the markets that they want to. The last one is the sharps. Lots of discussions about sharps, and here in the United States, should we close accounts? What is it that we need to look at from a sharp perspective? They're coming in, they're probably playing poker, they're playing anything with an edge, and they might even be doing advantage slot play. Whatever it is, wherever they're getting an edge, that is what they're doing. They are, they want the rewards because they know that they're wagering a lot, but they're going to shop their business around. They're incredibly price sensitive, and so they're going to have as many books as they possibly can. They're going to have accounts in as many books as they possibly can, so that they can play one book off of the other and possibly arbitrage. On our particular book, we had about 3 or 4 different personas inside of sharps that just helped us kind of keep track and understand who we needed to take money from and who we didn't. But really the key around sharp play is having a really good trading team, and a trading team with a lot of experience, people that can identify the sharp play from just, we call it mug play, or maybe not the smartest sports betting, and they typically the sharps would beat you to the price, or they would just flat out find your bad price. If you were offering a price that was totally different than the rest of the market, they're gonna come and take that. So this is kind of the risk manager's nightmares. A lot of people just don't want to have anything to do with them. We as a book actually kept them around. We had really good relationships with them actually, and it was just simply because that we saw it as as friends close and enemies closer. We always had discussions with them, and we're talking about less than 1% or 0.1% of the book. You're probably not going to make an awful lot of money on them, but they can be useful as being canaries in the mine to let you know kind of where markets are going to be going. So what are their motivations? Obviously, it's winning. It's winning money, and finding an edge. And to be honest, just because you might see somebody who's actually losing on your particular book or winning on your particular book, and net, they're the opposite, because they're just finding different prices, and they're going on one side or the other. We did know that a lot of that happened on those high volume sharp bettors, if they could get money down. Okay, so yeah, went over some personas. Unfortunately, we weren't able to have Chris join us, which is a bit of a shame. He had a really great piece of research that they put out in April, and that research was around the sports betting personas, and it's called the More You Know, the Better, defining U.S. Sports betting customer personas, and that was done in April. If you haven't gotten a chance to read it, because it's really, really interesting, and really well done, and it'll help you. It'll help you if you're running a book or you're running a casino and you're going to have a book. It'll help you start to think through some of these issues and challenges. I went through the casuals and the sports fans and the high rollers and the sharps. To be perfectly honest with you, we had 13 personas on our sports book inside of that casino and that casino group. It all started with understanding data and the behavior of all of the customers, not just from a betting perspective, but from a depositing perspective, from a what do they do with their money? They're always depositing on Thursday. They're always withdrawing on Mondays. These are all things that we would work on. And on that particular point, some of the some of the high rollers, we would encourage them. We would give them a percentage of their bankroll to leave it in the account, so that we don't have to pay. We're not paying finance fees in and out of accounts. So these are all things that you need to think about. But we had quite a few personas, but I just wanted to provide 4 that I knew that you would find in casinos. Talked a bit about Chalkline, and our next webinar is Thursday, August the 15th, and that's in particular about basketball. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take some questions.
Yeah, and Daniel, we've got a couple questions here. So the first question is specific to some of the examples that you were mentioning, and so one of the attendees asks, which sport book are you referring to, and maybe you can share a little bit about your experience at Sun.
Sure. So I started I built a sports book in 2009. It was our own software from scratch. Our current partner, Jason Foster at Chalkline, he and I started the book in 2009, sold it to Sun International in 2013. And so they had 13 properties in South Africa, second largest land-based casino group there, and that was one of the first times actually that a land-based casino group bought a sports book. And so we were integrated into that land-based casino group, and even now, that was the deal was done in 2013. Probably really didn't in earnest get cracking until 2014, and now it's 2019. Right now, 40% of the sports books acquisitions comes from the casino loyalty program, but about 80% of its revenue comes from that same cohort of people. So it's a massive opportunity, I think, for U.S. Casinos. And while we're looking at the proverbial top of the first in a baseball game for sports betting in the United States, and we're seeing FanDuel and DraftKings take a lead, there's going to be a massive opportunity for these land-based casino groups that have so many touch points with consumers to claw back some of that market share. And it feels like it may not happen in the next 6 months, but certainly over the long term, over 3 to 5 years.
And Daniel, the next question is about the opportunity for integration with loyalty. So can you share a little experience or data there?
Yes. So one of the, before our sports book was bought, a survey went to the loyalty program and said, well, do you bet on sports? And it was about 60% of them said that they did, and they would do it with the casino, with Sun International. So when we finally integrated, I think they had the Bally's casino management software. When we integrated with them, and you could kind of earn and burn loyalty points on our book, and be integrated as another entity inside of that casino group, we saw it was probably about a 7 or an 8x from the 6 months prior to the 6 months after the integration happened. It's massive, and what it does as a sports book is you then can compete on things other than price. Right now, New Jersey feels like a very price sensitive market. It also feels like like it's pretty bonus heavy and reliant on bonuses, and I think that has a lot to do with the fact that a lot of those books are pretty vanilla, and they haven't been able to target various personas and hone in on those personas that they want to hone in on, simply because the tech isn't quite there, it isn't quite nimble enough yet. But it's a big play for for a sports book associated with a casino group to integrate that casino loyalty program.
And then Daniel, the next question is relates to how to think about personas within the context of retail versus online. Obviously, several people point out that it's rolling out very unevenly across the United States when it comes to online and mobile. But what are some key things to keep in mind around the differences as you're thinking about personas and marketing strategies?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say is that it's going to go online eventually. So, and maybe just my experience so far, in talking to a lot of these casinos is that there's been an over reliance on things like snail mail and some and some non-digital marketing techniques, and so the quicker that the casino group can embrace digital marketing and do it well, and it feels like they're in a much better spot. Certainly that there is going to be some differences in personas around around retail versus online, but I can't help but think that there's that it's whether or not people are able to bet on mobile. It's a fait accompli, and it's probably going to happen a little quicker than you think. So the sooner you start to look at how people engage with with their mobile devices, the better they are. As far as specific personas around retail versus online, well, we had an amazing conversion, and I think that we're going to see that happen probably at a much quicker step. People are if they're nervous to go to a retail shop and talk to a to a bet taker at a retail shop, they're probably going to be a little more they're probably going to be as nervous to maybe bet on mobile, where they've got to deposit money and open up an account. So some of those personas I think are still pretty sound. Obviously there will be some differences between land-based and online, but I don't think that many.
And then, can you share a little bit of the data on retail and some of the betting terminal in non-mobile states? Like, what does that look like, and specifically, how will that impact some of the personas we're talking about?
Yeah, the 75% of the bets are being placed on kiosks, and really, I mean, it's really a function of being able to place, to go up to that kiosk, find what you're looking for, and place that wager, and whether you're putting $5 in or you're able to create an account. That those kiosks are I think are proving to be a critical transition between for those casual gamblers. I think the persona, I mean, the sharps, they're probably not going to have too many problems engaging with a teller. High rollers probably will have somebody with them, in their VIP suite to help them put that wager down. But it's really the casuals, that are on their own. Horse racing has been doing this for years. They've got bet concierges at every track to help people through that process of going and placing a wager, either at retail or to download an app. But the kiosks, are proving to be a great opportunity to transition people from maybe the more casual personas, understand betting, understand odds, and pushing them to alternative personas like sports fans.
And then, Daniel, the last question here is it relates to live events on property, and just as you think about live events around sports, whether it's March Madness or Super Bowl, how do you go about getting more information about those players?
Yeah, there's what we found at the casino group was that there was a lot of people that would hang out in the bars and the in the restaurants, and they'd be watching sports, and it was really a function of how do we wrap our arms around them, and I mean we're Chalkline's offering free to play games, but somehow, some way, there are how can you get information on unknown patrons? And there's plenty of them. So wrapping your arms around them and requiring them to in order to get into a viewing area, maybe get an email address or get a mobile phone number or something along those lines. But start that process of building a database, a digital database, an up-to-date database, and using all of those live events in order to do it, feels like the next right step. And then you can obviously, once you get an email address or a phone number, then you can send them offers, and you can start them on that process of opening a loyalty card, which is the best step to take. So getting them, getting one or two pieces of information starts that process, and all the events that happen on the casino property is a great opportunity to trade tickets for info.
Great. And so I believe that wraps up our questions. So just a quick look at what we covered today. And so we do look at the context of all of the marketing channels that are available, whether they are owned, earned, or paid channels. So you can see that today we really focused on everything in the upper left-hand corner, all the way down through identifying and carding unknown patrons that are in your casino and that are very curious about betting on sports. I think one thing that we're very familiar with here at Chalkline is that there will be a lot. And anybody who's paying attention will certainly agree that there will be a lot of conversation around sports betting when it comes to this college and professional football season coming up, and it's kicking off in a month for college and 6 weeks for pro. So it will be here very quickly. Last reminder is that if you would like to see any past webinars, we will send out a link to their past webinars in just a simple follow-up email after this presentation is complete. Our next The Operator's Edge live webinar will be on Thursday, August 15th at 12 p.m. Eastern, and it will be 3 reasons to bank on basketball as the football season kicks off. It's already time to look ahead to basketball and the opportunities there for anybody that is either going to take bets or take bets in the future when it comes to the NBA and college basketball. So with that, we wrap it up. Thank you very much for attending. Quick note about Chalkline. We provide free-to-play and real money games in the United States, Europe, and Africa, and have won a number of awards recently. We appreciate your time so much, and we'll hopefully see you again next month. Thank you, and take care.
Thank you very much.